Yeah, Wolf, 47 months is the sentence that the judge just imposed on Paul Manafort. We're waiting to get more details on exactly what the judge said during the sentencing, but a significant departure from what prosecutors certainly wanted here. We're talking about 47 months in prison for Paul Manafort. Remember, prosecutors are asking for anywhere from 19 to 24 years, 25 years. Paul Manafort now is going to serve only 47 months, well below what prosecutors were asking for in this case.
47 months, that's just under 4 years. What do you think, Laura?
I think this is a reflection
That's
of Judge
right.
Ellis, what he has been doing for the better part of 5 or so years, where he has gone before Congress. He's talked about the idea of he hates these mandatory minimum sentences, thinks they're excessive, not because he thinks the crime should not be punished, but because he feels as though, particularly when you have multiple counts and multiple charges, you are lopping and almost piling on in a way that's undeserved. Now, I am surprised that 47 months is the amount of time, given that a jury convicted 8 out of 18 different federal charges.
I wonder if the 9 months he's already served will be reduced from the 47 months.
It'll be added in there, absolutely.
It will be added in.
And now we all look to what Judge Jackson is going to do in district court.
Aaron Burnett out front is going to pick up our extensive coverage right now.
This is CNN Breaking News.
Good evening, I'm Aaron Burnett. Out front tonight, the breaking news. Humiliated and shamed. The president's former campaign chairman, Paul Manafort, just sentenced to 47 months. That is 1 month shy of 4 years for running a global scheme to avoid paying millions in taxes, defrauding banks. Now, these are all charges that came from the Mueller team. Manafort spoke for about 4 minutes, telling the judge, "I know it is my conduct that brought me here. My life personally and professionally is in shambles." Now, I just want to emphasize here, this is a remarkable moment in history, right? The campaign chairman of a presidential campaign sentenced to prison, going to handcuffs, 47 months. But I want to say this is a big blow for Mueller as well. They had asked for 19 to 25 years. The judge, T.S. Ellis, going against that request from prosecutors and going for only 47 months. So that is a stunning development. Obviously, Manafort's going to be sentenced again in a week in the D.C. court, but this is not what Team Mueller had been hoping for. Now, Manafort is the first person from Trump's inner circle to be sentenced. He was, of course, the first person who was indicted by Mueller. I want to go now to Shimon Prokupecz out front outside the Virginia courthouse. Shimon, this is not what Team Mueller wanted. They wanted up to 25 years, 47 months. That's what they got.
Way lower than what really anyone expected, Erin. When you think about it, way lower than what the prosecutors, what the special counsel's office wanted here. They wanted up to 25 years. Instead, they get just under 4 years. We're talking about a 47-month prison sentence for Paul Manafort, which could reasonably mean that he will not have to spend the rest of his life in prison. Yeah. Obviously, that was a big concern for him, for his family. As you said, he stood up. He sat, actually. He didn't stand up. He stayed in his wheelchair. He was brought here in a wheelchair. He spoke to the judge for about 4 minutes. He asked the judge for compassion, and it's clearly seen that that is what the judge here did, sentencing him to 47 months, well below what anyone had wanted from the special counsel's office, well below what prosecutors had asked for. And the judge just really finding, it seems, compassion here, sentencing him to the 47 months.
All right, Shimon, thank you very much. And I just want to actually, Shimon, as a follow there, you've got this sentencing. Obviously, we're waiting for Manafort, his team to leave. As you said, he's in a wheelchair, he has a cane. A remarkable downturn in his physical appearance, right? From a man who had, colored his hair and so prized his personal appearance with his fancy clothes. He's going to turn 70 next month. So this is an incredible leniency from this judge. But there is another judge right next week sentencing Manafort, and that sentence would go on top of this one.
It could go on top of it. It could run concurrent, which would mean that Paul Manafort would serve it together with this. There, he's facing a substantial amount of prison time as well. But given the way the judge here treated him, this could affect how the judge sees him in the Washington, D.C. case. He is facing about 10 years or so in Washington, D.C. But it all depends on what the judge there finds. Certainly, this judge seeing some room for leniency, went ahead and gave him the 47 months. The other thing for folks to keep in mind is that in the D.C. case, this is where he was going to cooperate. This is where he pleaded guilty and then decided he was going to cooperate with prosecutors, and then he started lying. So that ended, and it's not clear what effect that may have on the sentencing ultimately. But certainly the fact that he's only getting about 4 years here, I think is going to play a role in what happens now in Washington, D.C.
And look, it is a stunning development. All right, Shimon, you know, as you get more, let us know. And obviously, our Evan Perez is inside that courtroom. So as we get more color, the dramatic testimony, final words from Manafort saying he's been ashamed, his life is in a shambles, making the case to the judge, who obviously was moved by that and Manafort all the way along the line, resulting in this incredibly lenient relative to prosecutors' request sentence. I want to go now, as we await them leaving this courtroom, and get more from Evan. I want to go to the Democratic Senator from Connecticut, Richard Blumenthal, who sits on the Senate Judiciary Committee, also as an Attorney General for Connecticut. 47 months. Fair?
Well, it has to be a disappointment to the prosecution, and the prosecution was well deserved in trying to seek a longer term. Obviously, the judge has demonstrated some hostility before now to Robert Mueller.
Yes.
But the point is, there's going to be another reckoning for Manafort. And it will be a reckoning from a judge who has taken very serious note that he has shown no remorse and no respect for the law.
Now, I want to be clear. When he said to the judge, he spoke for about 4 minutes. He did not say he was sorry. He did not express remorse. We know that he had cooperated, and prosecutors said that cooperation was a load of baloney. They spent 50 hours questioning him because he kept lying and misleading, and he never really cooperated, even though he said he was. So 4 minutes he spoke to the judge. He said he felt humiliated and shamed, would be a gross understatement. The last 2 years have been the most difficult years for my family and I. Those are the things he talked about. He did not apologize. And yet this judge clearly taking his side. This is a judge who, I want to remind everyone, Senator, when this all started, said to Mueller's team, you don't care about Mr. Manafort's bank fraud. You really care about what information Manafort can give you that would reflect on Mr. Trump or lead to his prosecution or impeachment.
And I'm going to speak as a former prosecutor, as well as an attorney general of the state, a federal prosecutor, as well as state attorney general. This sentence, in my view, failed to do justice to the very serious crimes that Manafort has committed, as well as his utter disrespect for the law, feeling he is above the law, lying after his conviction about his giving polling data to the Russians while he was the Trump campaign manager, lying about his other conversations with the Russians, other kinds of untruths after his conviction.
And I want to be clear, a jury, right? A jury of his citizens, his fellow citizens, is who convicted him after a 3-week trial on all of these counts. Evan Perez was in the courtroom. All right, Evan, you've been inside all day. You've been waiting. You saw the 4 minutes of Manafort addressing the judge. Tell us everything you can.
Well, Aaron, you could hear a pin drop inside that courtroom as Manafort finally spoke. And let me tell you, one of the things that the judge raised when he finally announced the sentencing is that nowhere in Manafort's statement did he say that he was sorry for violating the law. And he said, the judge said, I was surprised that I did not hear you express regret. He says, I hope you reflect on that. And the fact that you did not comply with the law. And I think that's one of the things that the judge was struggling with here today. He said that 19 to 24 years was way too much. He says it was excessive. He says it was out of whack with the level of the crime that Paul Manafort had committed here. He cited a lot of cases, some of the cases that he had heard in this very courtroom, that he said he gave people probation or just a few months in prison. So he was struggling with the idea of sentencing Paul Manafort to 19 to 24 years in prison. But he also said that this was obviously a very serious crime, and that's why he arrived eventually at 47 months, so just under 4 years. I think a lot of people were surprised. You could see the look of astonishment on the look of a couple of on the faces of a couple of the prosecutors at the prosecution table. I think the defense has to be pretty happy with this result. And look, I think as the defense described, what they said that Paul Manafort had the ability to pay a $25 million fine, $25 million in restitution and an additional fine. You could see Mrs. Manafort sitting in the front row, shaking her head no. One of the prosecutors, Mr. Assange, mentioned the fact that Paul Manafort still has ownership of two homes, one in Florida and one here in Alexandria, and he says the prosecution argued that Mr. Manafort had the ability to pay an additional fine on top of the $25 million that the judge just ordered him to pay. In the end, the judge decided that he was not going to impose that additional fine, but you could see that Mrs. Manafort was not in agreement with the idea of paying anything more than the restitution that he's already have to pay.
All right, so I just want to go inside that room to that moment. You're saying you could hear a pin drop. There was a look of astonishment on some of the prosecutors' faces. What was the attitude of Paul Manafort in the 4 minutes that he was speaking? Did he come off to you, Evan, watching him as defiant, as pathetic? I mean, I know he's sitting there in a wheelchair with a cane. I mean, he has his hair is now gray. He used to color it. I mean, he looks like a broken man. But what was it was like in those 4 minutes watching him?
Well, it's a vast difference from the Paul Manafort we saw. He was certainly a lot cockier when he was showing up with his tailored suits before 9 months ago when the judge decided to throw him in jail for witness tampering. And so he was a different man. Obviously, he spoke a lot more quietly. The judge asked him to speak more loudly because he couldn't hear him. And so eventually you could hear him in the courtroom. And look, he spoke very, very, very emotionally about the impact on his family. He said that this has been embarrassing and humiliating for his professional and his personal life. He also talked about the impact on his family. His wife was sitting just a few feet behind him.
Is he crying during all of this, or just
during the break? During the break, after he finished his remarks, during those 4 minutes, he turned and looked at his wife, and you could see his eyes were moist. They were a little red, and she just sat there silently as he spoke. And then eventually, he just sat there quietly with his hands on his chin, sort of as his lawyers and everybody else in the courtroom sort of milled about. And so you could see that this was a moment where everything perhaps was finally hitting Paul Manafort after this 2 years of this investigation. You could see that this is finally the moment where everything was coming home to him.
Now, I want to ask you, Evan, when you look at the 47 months, right? Obviously, he's been in solitary confinement. He's been in jail, right, since last summer. So I don't know what we're talking about, 7, 8 months or something. Does that count against? So this is now down to already 39, 40 months?
Yeah, I mean, that will count. At least it was our understanding. The judge was still finishing up his remarks. This has been a very, very long proceeding, as you know. And we expect that this will count towards that. And obviously, Aaron, he has another sentencing scheduled for next week with a judge who has shown very little patience for him. I think Judge Ellis, I will say, has treated him more kindly. I mean, frankly, he has treated the government more roughly. As a matter of fact, today he said one of the things that was not going to be under consideration, one of the things that the judge said he was not going to even think about, was the allegations of whether Paul Manafort was part of some conspiracy to collude with Russians to interfere in the 2016 election. That's something that he sort of just freelanced and interjected in the middle of the proceeding, which is, again, a little bit of a surprise because, again, you remember those comments last year where the judge sort of just went off script and scolded the special counsel's office. As a matter of fact, today he brought up when one of the prosecutors was talking about the special counsel, he scolded him and said, "You mean the government? I don't want to hear about the special counsel. You mean the government." So you could tell that he has a little bit of a lack of patience for the idea of the special counsel and the idea that this case was handled outside of the normal procedure of the Justice Department.
So, Evan, one more question, and I want to go to the White House. Just to make it clear to people, we had talked about this being a possible life sentence for Paul Manafort because he turns 70 next month. So if he had gotten anywhere in the 19 to 24, 25-year range, prosecutors had requested that would have been a life sentence. Now he's looking at getting out, counting time served, right around exactly the age of 73. When you talk about the look of astonishment on prosecutors' faces, Evan, let me ask you about Andrew Weissman. I understand that he was in the room. He is, sort of the star celebrity prosecutor on Team Mueller. Could you see his face?
Yes, you could see his face. He showed no emotion. He just sat there sort of stone-faced. There were a couple of the other prosecutors who sort of had the look of astonishment. And look, I think as the judge spoke and as he said how he felt that these guidelines of 19 to 24 months, 24 years rather, were out of whack, you could see them chatting with each other and looking at each other. I think they were starting to brace for what was coming. They knew that this was not going to be anywhere near what they were hoping for. And look, I think one of the things that the prosecution did, the special counsel did, is they didn't argue for the 19 to 24. They just simply cited that as the guidelines and said, Judge, take a look at that and use that as your guidepost. They didn't argue very strongly for that. So I think they were prepared for a lot less than 19 to 24. I don't know that they were prepared for 4 years.
Right, for 4 years. All right, so Evan, we're going to go back to you in just a moment. I do want to just make sure everyone knows, as we're getting more information, as people come out of that courtroom, I want to go back to Evan and Shimon. But in addition to the 47 months, we now know that the Judge Ellis has ordered Manafort to pay restitution of as little as $6 million, as much as $25 million. Not sure exactly how we'll decide which it is, but that's the range that's been put out there. Fine of $50,000 and 3 years in supervised release. I want to make it clear that's in addition to the 47 months he has to serve in prison, of which we believe 7 will count as time served that he has already served. And just to remind everybody, it was a jury of Americans, of his peers, who convicted him of defrauding taxpayers, not paying taxes on millions and millions of dollars, defrauding banks and other things. I want to go to Caitlin Collins, who's at the White House. All right, Caitlin, what's the reaction? Is this seen as a victory by the president?
Well, we know the White House has been watching this closely. They've tried for the last several months to distance themselves from Paul Manafort and say that he only spent a little bit of time with the campaign and wasn't that high ranking, even though he was there for several months and was one of the most senior positions. And Kellyanne Conway was just actually speaking with reporters outside the White House minutes before this judge sentenced Paul Manafort to 47 months in prison. And we asked her what the White House's reaction to Paul Manafort was, and including if the president had ruled out a pardon for him. Because you'll remember last fall, the president said he hadn't thought about a pardon for Paul Manafort, but he wasn't going to take it off the table, telling the New York Post, why would I take it off the table? Kellyanne Conway said she hadn't discussed it with President Trump, but she did not rule it out. When I said, has this been ruled out yet? But then she did make a point, and Aaron, you can expect to hear this over the next several days from White House officials when they are doing interviews. And that's that comment that the judge made as the sentencing first got underway in the first beginning hours. They said that this sentencing had nothing to do with Russian collusion, and they wanted to make that point clear at the beginning as all of this was unfolding. And that is something Kellyanne Conway pointed to repeatedly, though she did say that she believed what the prosecutors were going for, that over 19 years of a sentence, they believed that was harsher than what other people have received for similar cases to Paul Manafort.
All right, Caitlin, as you get more, we'll go back to you. I want to